we are there or thereabouts. I think we are just past, so we'll kick off. Those of you who know me, you'll be delighted to know you're not going to hear an awful lot from me. So that's good news for all concerned. My name is Dave Adamson, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this second in our series of Copilot webinars. I am the Chief Technology Officer for Espria, so it's my job to come and guff along with you guys about this sort of stuff, and also keep an eye on the emerging technology market and how we can, run these kind of enablement sessions and bring information and advice and access to helpful people like my colleague Tita to help you get started with new stuff as it becomes available. Tita joins us from our CSP partner Bytes as a pre-sale solution consultant. He'll introduce himself in a moment when he kicks off his bit, but just to kind of set the scene for today, we're going to have a quick couple of minutes, not too much of death by PowerPoint, just to kind of set the scene around where we are. I'm going to hand over to Tita, who's going to take you through some live demos. So that was the kind of feedback we did from our initial Copilot intro webinar, was that people wanted to see, if possible, some kind of real life use cases brought to life. If you have any questions as we go, please feel free to use the Q&A functionality to pop them in, and I'll feed them into Tita at appropriate moments so that we don't disrupt his flow. And then we'll have an option for a kind of more broad Q&A at the end if anybody has any follow-up questions. Big disclaimer, it's really important, particularly for Tita, but also for me. We're in slightly uncharted territory doing live demos of AI, so it's quite possible stuff will go wrong. My own experience of Copilot, M365 Copilot so far, is that it's mostly fine, and then every now and then it'll say, yeah, I'm not working right now, sorry. So if that does happen, it's not Tita's fault. And if it goes a little bit left field, those of you who've had some interesting experiences with prompt hallucinations and those sorts of things might find the same happens to us. So this will be warts and all if it heads in that direction. So we're talking today about Microsoft 365 Copilot. As we all know, there are many Copilots emerging and many more just being announced. So Copilot for OneDrive has just been teased, which will be coming in the next month or two. Specifically, we're going to focus around the Microsoft 365 estate today, rather than Copilot Studio or GitHub Copilots or in sales or finance applications. But if you do have any questions around those things subsequently, the team would be more than happy to have a conversation with you. We're going to talk a little bit about how you drive a Copilot before Tita shows you how to do it with high quality prompting. Prompt is a word that probably I've said more times in this meeting than I'd said in the whole of last year, unless I was telling people off for being late to meetings. It's a whole new kind of function that's been created. I've seen jobs being advertised for prompt engineers. And I think the message is, for something like Copilot, you get out what you put in. And yes, that's true of the prompting activities, but it's also true of the way that your environment's configured to make the best use of it. So to use M365 Copilot, really your data needs to be living in the Microsoft cloud as much as possible. Obviously, you don't have to have all of your data in the Microsoft cloud, much as they would like you to. But for Copilot to understand the context around the information that it's handling with and for you, it leverages something called the Microsoft Graph. So the Microsoft Graph is an intelligent API-driven function that brings together all of the information it knows about you from Teams, from OneDrive, from email, from SharePoint, from the way that you communicate, who you communicate with, who you share and collaborate with within your organization, and surface information that's available to you. Those who've been long-term 365 subscribers might remember Delve. You might consider Delve as a very early version of the Microsoft Graph. Not just from a data point of view, but it's really important that to make the most of that data, you understand the way that your data is secured and shared. There are lots of horror stories, and I've seen one or two of people willy-nilly handing out Copilot licenses and then some prompts being inputted by people accidentally surfacing data they didn't know they had access to, that perhaps they shouldn't have access to. So I think advice would be, before any major scale rollout that you choose to do of a Copilot technology, make sure your house is in order as much as possible. Obviously, that's something we'd love to come and help you with, and we'll talk a little bit about later on. So for prompting specifically, there are many different types of prompts, and you can use them depending on what sort of task you want done. Depending on your role in the organization, how you use and drive Copilot might look very different. You could be somebody in a sales and marketing role, an internal role, HR, finance, technology, as I know many on the call are, and your use case is going to be different depending on who you are. Some great examples I've seen is friend of mine who started up her own sole trader agency to go contracting, doing some technology consulting. When she was onboarding with new suppliers, she was finding that they were being asked as part of their ESG initiatives, or she was being asked as part of their ESG initiatives to provide things like a modern slavery declaration or a data processing agreement. Wind back a couple of years, she'd have probably had to go and pay a lawyer to produce a bunch of stuff. Today, she pops into Copilot and said, this is my scenario, this is the type of work I do and the type of people I work with. Can you produce me a sort of template data processing agreement for somebody in my position? And out came a 3-page data processing document, which looks very similar to the sorts of things you no doubt have in your organizations and you'll have seen from your suppliers and vendors. It's always important to get stuff validated and not just assume that the output is 100% correct, which if we have a moment, I'll show you an example of a bit later on. But in general terms, the time to value has been radically accelerated from quite a costly and lengthy process into something that she could turn around very, very quickly. A good prompt, and there are documents out there from Microsoft about how best to create prompts, but a good prompt has 4 key ingredients. It has a goal. What do you want? It has a context. Why do you need it? And who are the people that are important to this prompt or this activity that you're undertaking? Where should I gather the information from? So in this case on the screen, we're talking about email and Teams chats, and we're giving it a time period to make sure that the content we're interested in, that it's only producing things that are relevant to content that we're interested in. And what are your expectations? So please use simple language so I can get up to speed quickly. You'll note the use of the word please there, which is something that comes naturally to me because I'm a very polite chap. Not all of my colleagues are the same, but certainly when you get to the best practice guides, actually politeness is important from Microsoft and other large language model vendors' perspectives. They do provide better outputs when you treat them well. It's probably just a nice thing to do anyway, right? Specificity is important, so providing instructions to Copilot with a topic, with a purpose and tone, and the required length as well, so you don't want something too big or too short coming back. Keep it conversational, so give feedback to Copilot based on the information that's coming to you. Give examples, so use specific keywords or phrases that are pertinent to whatever it is that you're trying to talk about. Asking it for feedback is something that I found is really useful. So even asking it how you could have written a better prompt to get better quality information back from it. So that kind of feedback loop it can use and can produce you a better output. If you write legibly, you're more likely to get good quality outputs. You do need to check it for accuracy. You will find occasions where information might be slightly inaccurate or in worst case, somewhat invented. And you can't just assume that the output is 100% accurate. And providing the details of the context, as we saw on the last slide, is really the key to getting high quality output. In terms of what not to do, don't be vague because you won't get good quality output. Don't request unethical or inappropriate content. I was producing using Microsoft Designer, the image generator, something for a leaving card for somebody a couple of weeks ago who's a self-confessed nerd. And we used the phrase nerd in generating a sort of cartoon-like image of that person to go on the card. And Copilot refused, or Designer refused to generate it because it considered the term nerd to be pejorative. So we had to adjust the language somewhat. So be careful with what you ask for. Don't use slang, jargon, informal language. You might find that you don't get fully professional responses back in the way that you might expect, but also if you've got industry terminology or if you use acronyms, they're open to being interpreted in the wrong way. Don't give conflicting information, so don't ask it to do opposing tasks in the same prompt because it won't understand what to do. And you'll get better quality. We talked about the feedback loop on the last slide. You'll get better quality output if you structure it like a normal conversation. So if you don't interrupt the speaker or Copilot in this case, or you don't change direction too radically, you'll find that it's easier to get the right kind of outputs from it. I'm going to hand over to Tita, who's going to take you through some real world examples of how to drive Copilot and what some of the use cases you might see are. If you do have any questions, please fire them into the Q&A, as I said, and I will handle them and feed them into Tita or answer them myself as we go through.
Thank you very much for that, Dave. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be with you today to kind of talk about Copilot and in this case, talk and demo the solution. So as Dave said, I've been in Bytes for a couple of years and I work in a technical pre-sales role in the modern workplace space. So when Copilot landed, it very much landed, it very much was within my remit of my role in the organization. So I'm just going to go through some examples. I'll try and follow the best practice for prompting, as Dave politely put there, but we'll see how we go. So hopefully you can see my screen now. So the first scenario I'm going to kind of cover is using Copilot in Microsoft PowerPoint. And the scenario here is I've got a document that is a Word document. And I'll just bring that on the screen so that you see where the journey starts and where it ends. So I've got this Word document. It's again, it's all fictitious, if you appreciate that, but it's a merger document, so a merger between two organizations, Contoso and Fabricant, and you can see the legal, those of you in the legal space will more likely recognize the sections that you have in merger documents. There's a recitals, there's an agreement section, and there's various articles. So it's quite a wordy, lengthy document, 1,500 words. And this is just a short version. But the ask here is to kind of transform this from this Word document into something that can be presented so using as a presentation. So what I'm going to do in that space is I fire up PowerPoint, and then I just click on the blank presentation. I will point that you can also use template. I'm not using one in this session, but you can if you had a set of templates that you create your presentations in, you can do that as well. So you can see Copilot is nested here within the navigation experience here. And even when you launch Copilot, you can see you're already given some suggestions as to the kind of things you can do, some things to try. And one thing to bear in mind is that it's your co-pilot. You can always discard anything created, so don't feel apprehensive about selecting any of these sections as you kind of learn how Copilot works and so on. It's creating your content, which you can discard if it's not what you want. But it's important to kind of have that remove that apprehension. So in this particular case, I want to create it from a file. So I'll just click create presentation from file, and then you can see all the documents I've been working on. These are just my work documents that I have access to. The one I want to do is the merger, the V1 merger. So you can see create presentation from file. Now I've not done any restrictions. I've not said something like create 5-slide presentation or 10 slides. I've just used the default. But yeah, you can do that if you wanted. Of course, you can, as we said earlier on, the more information you provide in the prompt, the more accurate the response you'll get. So you can see now you always get a kind of a status of what it's doing. It gives you information. You'll always see, even in small print, I always feel Microsoft should make that a bit larger or maybe in bold. AI generated content may be inaccurate, and it's almost, you may think, so what's the point of all this? Well, it will get you from 0 to 40, 45%. As Dave said, really, I wrote it down, time to value. It will reduce the time it takes for you to do things, but it won't completely eliminate the need for you to refine it, make changes and what have you. Um, you can see we're 91% there down the way of creating the slide deck, and that should come up shortly with these different sections. Um, it was a bit quicker last time. Okay, so here we are. So merger agreement between Contoso and Fabricam. It's got an agenda section, it's got recitals, so it's got the different sections that you'd expect in a presentation. It's got some default images that it recognizes against the context of the words. And it's given me 5 slides out of the document, which was what, 1,500 words. Yeah, and again, it starts from 0, so you may want to change some of the images, but you can see how it's created the different sections: Article 3, Article 3.0, 3.1, the different terms underneath each section. So as starters for 10, you may want to then do a few more things to it. Like, for example, you may say, let's have, please, can you, being polite again, Dave, please, can you add a conclusion slide. So if I just do that simple, then hopefully it will add it. Now, I didn't say to the end of the slide deck, so it may well just plonk it somewhere in between slide 7 and 8. And again, sometimes it will, if you say make slide 14, sorry, make slide 12 a conclusion slide, that would be a more targeted prompt. But again, we want a slide that's conclusion. And it's done it to the end. So if I go here, it gives a conclusion statement around the merger document, the merger presentation. You could also do things like please add an introduction slide. And even though, to be honest, even with typos, it's good to be precise, but with the odd typo, it will still I've seen it work for me when I'm hastily typing something and I've left the odd word out. So it's not too bad on the typos, but obviously, yeah, it's best to just give it as much information. So again, this was just, if you think of where we were whilst it's doing that, you remember we came from this space here. And again, that's the use case where you've got a document, you've got it in a Word format, and you want to transform it to something that you can position in front of stakeholders and in front of partners, in front of your clients. And yeah, it's just taken it from scratch. So the content is there. You may want to absolutely change the image. It's never perfect. Something like that may not be, well, I suppose this is a technology company, so maybe that's appropriate. But you can obviously change the images that come with the with Copilot. So if it produces something, it's not quite right, you just change the image. But again, it's not designed to create everything without you making changes. You'll absolutely be guaranteed to make some changes, but at least it addresses that scenario of writer's block. I need to create these slides. How do I get the ball rolling? So that's one sort of journey. And I've done, we had the Word document. I used Copilot. Please, can you create create a slide based on that? But you can also use it to create information, to create a set of slides not referencing a document. So if, for argument's sake, if I just go down here and I'll just change topic. When you click on change topic, that's basically telling Copilot, thank you for what we've done. We're going to change gears now. I want to talk to you about something else. So I'm going to change topics now. I won't save the work, and hopefully it'll also prompt me to say, do you want me to save what you've done before we move on? So I'm changing topic. I need to create a set of slides for a student field trip. And I'm just going here, please, I didn't say please, let me just say please, be polite. Please create a set of slides for a field trip to the Lake District for Year 4 students. So, you're in the education sector. Not saying you can't do that. Obviously, we can go and to get resources, but you want that status for 10 to get you there. Year 4, Lake District students. So I'll put some context around what I want Copilot to respond. So I click on send. And when it asks me about the existing slides, I will just say carry on. I won't ask it to save, or maybe it won't. You see, sometimes it doesn't quite do what I expected. Hopefully, Mr. Copilot will say, do you want me to say what you're doing before I move on? Well, let's see.
I think like most things in the Microsoft cloud, it is a journey rather than a destination. And you'll find that over time, as the various versions iterate and are released, that the way it works and behaves will change,
Yeah.
the functionality will change, and I think perhaps most importantly with Copilot and generative AI, the reliability will probably improve.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay. I mean, obviously in the real world, yeah, you would you'd have probably saved the slides you were working on and then clicked change topic, and then it would have started from the top. But yeah, so ignore the fact that it's added to the existing slide deck. But if you look at what it's done here, field trip for Year 4 students to Lake District, it's given me some visuals, some information, about things to do, activities to participate in. And then, yeah, well, you see, I'm not quite sure about the skydiving element. But again, that kind of thing where you can you're in that space where you need to create some content for that activity, whether it's year 6, year 4 university in the education sector. Copilot is very good at for that kind of thing, to create content, and then you can obviously refine it. As I said, you can reference your templates, your own templated information, so that when it's creates the presentation, it's done it with your template. So another prompt I will add is, if I ask, can I say something like, please add a quiz section with 6 questions on the Lake District. Actually, I need to refine that, because when I did that the first time, it just gave me, I want it to give me some questions that I can put to my students, but so 6 questions around the Lake Districts for year 6 students. So again, I just want that, adding those questions for that experience as someone in that space. It could have been anything. It could have been if it was a different context, finance, legal, and you wanted some questions specific to that asked, you could do that. And so you can see here, it's referencing the presentation to give some questions and so on. It hasn't added it to the slide deck, but what I could do is easily copy and paste it and add it there using the copy function. And again, it's that scenario. It's not starting from scratch. I've got some pointers here. I've got some questions here. I didn't have to Google it, or without bad mouthing Google Space. So I had it all in my place of work. I didn't have to open another browser, start looking for information. So using Copilot in PowerPoint, you can reference documents and it can create presentation material from it, but you can also use it to create information from scratch. So generative AI create that presentation based on the questions that you've put in the prompt. So those are the main things in terms of Copilot in Word. In PowerPoint, I beg your pardon. And again, there are other placeholders that you can go into as well. In fact, a good one is summarizes presentation. And again, that's something which I'll also show you in the Word, in Copilot in Word. But one of the use cases for Copilot is, you've got so much on, you want to look at this document or this Word document and understand what are the main context of it, instead of going through the 19 slides or the 50 slides. So you can see it's summarized it based on the context. And of course, because I've got the field trip as well there, it's factored that in, rightly so, because it's just gone straight from I didn't separate the experiences. But again, the scenario of using Copilot to summarize content, this is where you would use it to kind of accelerate the time it takes for you to go through that document. So that was Copilot in Word. Sorry, that was Copilot in PowerPoint. So now I'm going to jump into Copilot in Word, and the different scenario I'm going to show you here is, if I just open a new session here, and what I want to do is demonstrate how you could also use it to for that scenario where you're looking to, and I know it's not applicable for everyone, but say you happen to need to compare the differences between 2 documents. So I could say something like, please compare the difference between, and then if I reference the file I want to compare, which was, okay, so here we go. So I need to type the name there. As I type, eventually it finds what I'm looking for. If I just close my sessions here to make things a little easier. So reference a file between, there we go. So merger, so there are 2 documents about a merger between these two companies, one dated 2023, one dated 2024. It could be anything whereby there's a difference. You need to know what's happened, what's changed. So what I will do here is I reference the first document that I want Copilot to check. So to compare the difference between this document and then again, if I do reference file and start typing, there we are, merger composer 2023. And I want the results, and please place the results in a table. So please compare the difference between these two documents. Please place the results in the table. Click on generate. So what it will do, it will go to those two documents and again, highlight what the differences are. And things like not just all documents, whether there's the ask, absolutely, this is where it can work, particularly in legal documents. I'd imagine that's where you need to find any differences to the T where things are, but it could be a technical document, it could be an educational document. What's the difference between this curriculum and the last year's curriculum? What are the changes? It's a lot quicker way to kind of see where the differences are and see where value can be added by making, highlighting those changes. So you can see it's highlighted the section, it's highlighted which document, and it says, for example, if I just choose a couple of them in the interest of time, you can see there's a stock value of 0.01 versus 0.40. In the article 2.3, the number of shares, no, that number of shares is okay, but there's obviously something else different here. If I just move the prompt out of the way, we've got something here. Okay, so Article 2.3, there's 600 fractional shares versus no fractional shares. So just to give you that an idea, and I suppose how you would do that if you didn't have Copilot, it's basically a more painful experience. You would do something. If I just show you the two documents, 2023 and the 2024 one, very quickly. So you would probably do something like merger 2024. So you'd have the two documents here, at least that's how I tend to do these things as well. And you're kind of going, okay, recitals, what's the difference between 23 and 24? Agreements, then you're kind of going down and, you're using the naked eye to highlight these differences. And again, Copilot is an example where it can absolutely go through that. If this document had 15, 20 pages and this second document had equally the same number or more pages, it will go through and literally give you a table experience for where those differences lie, which is what this does here. So comparing the differences between a couple of documents is a good use case for Copilot, but equally another scenario where you could use it, I won't save this, would be if I close one of these documents and just have this main one here. Again, similar to PowerPoint, you fire up Word and Copilot appears in the banner there. It also appears centrally in the central place, center of the document as well. But you could do things like, in fact, you always have some prompts here. Summarize this document. If I can be more granular and say, summarize this document in 50 words or less. I don't know, one of the things that I experienced once was I asked it Copilot to summarize this document, and the summary was quite lengthy. It almost felt that, maybe I should just read the document. So it was probably a bad example, but the fact that I just saw the results coming in the Copilot chat and I was looking at the document, it just felt as if it was just copying everything into the chat and saying, there you go. But you can see I've asked it to give me a short summary of the document. What it will do, it'll give you that document, merge it between these two companies, their softwares, the agreement outlines, terms and conditions, and it references where it's got that information for. So you've got hyperlinks that will take you to areas in the document. So that scenario where you need to review a document, review a legal document, review a curriculum, or anything in that space where you want to rapidly see what the differences are or see whether it's relevant then to your use case, then you can do that. But you can also do things like, if you wanted to, similar to what I did with PowerPoint, if I wanted to add an introduction, if in this case you could do things like, you could do that as well. So please add an introduction. I'll just leave it like that. I don't even have to say at the top or the bottom. Hopefully it will know that introduction means at the beginning. So, if you're talking to your colleague and you say, Dave, could you add an intro to that document? Dave, I wouldn't have to tell Dave where the intro is. So you really treat it as your colleague. You just speak to Copilot as you speak to your co-workers, and hopefully, having said that, oh, okay, I see what I've done here. So because I've done the introduction I didn't launch Copilot in the central pane, which I should have. So yeah, so I won't say it's a glitch, but it's almost like once you know your whereabouts, where to do things. So because I didn't launch Copilot within the documents, it's given me the answers within the sidebar. But hey, it's a simple copy and paste. If I just make sure it's running again. There we are. Okay, please add an introduction. Let me just get Copilot. Okay, apologies for this. I will just, there we are. Please add an introduction. And then you should see it over there. Pulling things together, and eventually you get that. And equally, please add a conclusion. Please make the tone more professional. Please make the tone friendlier. Little things like that. Please make it more exciting. It can do, it can do those kind of cosmetic, but equally important changes depending on your role. So that's for sure. One other thing to bear in mind, yeah, you can see here AI generated content may be inaccurate, so always validate what's been generated. At this bottom here, you see it's done it quite there, not quite at the, it's done at the beginning, I guess. I could probably move it to different parts of the document, but yeah, this is just an example of the kind of things you could do. So reviewing the content, adding sections, you even have some placeholders there, so make it more formal. Please make this. That's one I've used before, or enthusiastic, or exciting upward. What? Something like that, then you'll probably see things like we are excited to talk about this, and it'll raise the tone. So yeah, ultimately it depends on the ask, but that's how, the main scenarios for Copilot in Word that we're seeing is, creating a document from small text, going through a document so that is it relevant for you, asking questions about the document, comparing 2 or 3 documents as well, that kind of thing is what it will do. One thing to bear in mind as well, as I said, it's your Copilot, it's your content. So at the end of any Copilot experience, you can delete it or keep it. You shouldn't be any apprehension in that space. You can see it's running through the mills. It'll eventually do it. And what I wanted to show you here is you can see you've got different versions. So because I've done a couple of prompts, it's created. You have a history of what's been created. So this was the first prompt when I asked it to add an introduction, and then the second draft when I asked it to kind of change the tone and so on. So the more prompts you do, Copilot will continue to keep the historic ones for that scenario whereby you think, you know what, I want that first version and so on. So it's embedded within Word, comparing documents, summarizing documents, that kind of thing is where you would go, where you use Copilot in Word. The final thing I want to show you is Copilot in Excel. Now, what I will do here is, as you can see, it still comes up with this preview, which it's been like that for, maybe a lot ever since it's come live. But what I have noticed is that there's the functionality is getting better. You know, it's improving. So even though it's in preview, there are things that you can do to you can use it to a certain degree, and you can get some results out of the prompts that you do. So if we were to do something like in this case here, I've got sample data, and again, it's student data, sample, not real not real individuals, and it's got the maths, physics, chemistry scores of these students. So again, as someone in that sector, you may want to dive in a bit and get more information around these results. Bearing in mind it's just 40 rows here, I'd imagine it would be a lot larger. But when you launch Copilot, again, you get in Excel, you get these options to choose from scratch. So if I just clicked on Analyze, because I'm not quite sure what prompts I want to do, it gives you, I can analyze data, show insights, pivot tables, etc. So it gives me some examples of prompts I could use, such as, are there any outliers to my data? The total physics and total chemistry. So it's almost like, what are the totals from the chemistry column and the physics column? One thing to bear in mind with Copilot in Excel is when you're referencing the tables, the columns, you need to literally kind of put them in quotes. So if I've got this prompt here saying, please create a pivot chart of name, which is the name of the students, versus maths. So I want that visual listing the names of the students against how they performed in maths. And then what it will do, it will go through there, run through the mills, analyzing your data. Then eventually I'll be presented with that visual. And I've got it over here. So it's quite small, but what I can do then, or what you can do is, if I'm happy with it, I just click on add to a new sheet. And what it does, it adds that visual to sheet 4. And you can see, if I just maximize the view, I've got that pivot chart there. So again, for that scenario, to create visuals based on the data that's in the view. But you can also do things like, you want to kind of find out things like how many students had a value in chemistry of more than 50%. Well, I guess in this case, let me just change that to 80 for argument's sake. So again, if you've got a large data set and you want to quickly get those, how you would do it without Copilot or how I would do it if I didn't know it, I'd probably use the sort field. But if you have loads of columns and you want to quickly get those results, then, and a visual, which is what it's doing here, it's giving another pivot chart, which I can add it as a new sheet, and then you'll see that I've got a visual as sheet 5, which will just list the students that got 80% or more in chemistry. So depending on your use case, on how you want to slice and dice, very simple visual options here. They also give you some suggestions, as you can see, how many different column name are there, which is basically saying how many different names are there. But if you wanted to get a distinct value out of the columns, you would use it and just use the naming conventions here for the columns, put them in quotes and so on. So I would say of the 3 Copilots, the one in Excel, there are a few more, what I would say, rules to kind of follow, by way of, if you're referencing the column, please, you need to add it in single quotes. There are some things I've tried where it hasn't yet worked. So as we said, it's still in preview, but I just showed you the simple ones that seem to work, and the ones that they suggest, obviously, like percentage of distribution, name, how many different names are there. Obviously, if it was something else that you wanted to find the unique value of, you can use Copilot in that scenario. But it sits in here, it sits on the right hand bar, and it gives you that experience. And I think sort and filter, add formulas column. Yeah. So yeah, so those were I guess, by way of recap, just wanted to show you Copilot in PowerPoint, creating content, referencing different documents to create visuals. You saw it added content to the existing slides. As Dave said, yeah, there'll be areas where it's a bit glitchy, but look, did it get me from 0 to 50 or 40%? Definitely. Comparing two documents, you can just ask it, and I only put two. I've actually done it with 3 and 4, and you get the column with four columns and referencing the 4 documents. So that's a good productivity gain. And then, of course, reviewing a document, refining it, creating content. In Excel, you've got capabilities there, still in preview, but still there are some scenarios where you can, if you need to kind of create some simple visuals against your data, make sure that your data is in a tabular format, and then use the prompts here. Hopefully it should get better with time, but as you can see, it's still in preview, but good enough to kind of showcase. We've definitely been kind of showcasing it now. I think it's a stage where you can use it with a view of it obviously getting better as time progresses. So I'm going to pass over back to Dave, unless there were any questions whilst I'm on. I mean, I'll still be on after anyway.
So we've had one in, Tita, which I will come back around to in just a moment. Thank you ever so much for that. That was a real. It's nice to see kind of real world insight, and you can see the good, the bad, and the ugly of what's been happening as Tita's been going through the demo. And you can spot an experienced presenter when he manages to convince himself not to try and type the word enthusiastically while everybody's watching him, and instead goes for exciting. So I spotted that, and I tip my cap to you. Tita's taking you through some of the M365 ecosystem. The one that I've probably had the most success with in my use of Copilot is inside Teams. It's quite hard to demo a lot of the Teams functionality inside a Teams meeting. So in the best spirit of Blue Peter, while we've attempted to kind of live demo this as much as we can, here's one we created earlier. So I'm going to get my excuses in early. I've just rebuilt my laptop, so a new laptop, lucky me. I haven't yet, I discovered, reinstalled all my video editing software that I use for doing sessions like this. So I thought, never mind, I'm inside the Microsoft ecosystem. I'll use the Microsoft tool. I will use Clipchamp. And those of you familiar with the phrase "you get what you pay for," it's free. So with that being said, please excuse the slightly clunky attempts to censor any sensitive data. But I'm just going to run you through a session I had with one of our internal developers yesterday, looking at some stuff around a project that we're doing. And we're towards the tail end of our meeting now, and you can see that I've asked the Copilot to recap the meeting so far. So it's going to generate a response. I'm going to try and time how much I talk. I've shortened, based on what you saw in Tita's demo, I've shortened some of the sequencing, because you don't want to sit here and watch it say generating for ages. But you can see it's producing a kind of highlight of key topics, and like in the other apps, it provides the citations for where in the conversation those things have happened. Really good, really strong at creating action items out of meetings. So instead of needing to take notes and write them down, here's a fantastic list of all of the things we talked about and the stuff we want to do as follow-up actions to the meeting. It's not perfect, but I reckon it's about 90% good in my experience, which is kind of good enough for me. One I'm really interested in is sentiment. So when we do customer meetings, being able to say, how did our proposal go down? How was it received? When we had this call about a P1 security breach that a customer's had, were they collaborative in their approach, were they defensive, and those kind of things, and help develop the team and the way that we interact with our customers to provide a better user experience. What's unresolved? So what questions did we have in the meeting which we didn't get an answer to, or we couldn't figure out a solution for? That might not be listed as an action item because it's not necessarily clear, but it's another way of making sure that you've got that information captured and that you can do something with it and it's not lost in the course of the meeting. You can see some other prompt suggestions there, as you saw in Tita's demos, that can give you ideas of other things you might like to ask. Once the meeting's over, so in that meeting I recorded it, I can come back into the meeting. I've got an option to click on a recap button, which opens the recap pane, which you only see certain aspects of if you've got a Copilot license. Hopefully I'm not sharing the audio because there's a bit of a hiss in my ear, so apologies if you've got a bit of a hiss as well. That's showing me the AI generated meeting notes. So in my case, fantastic for board meetings where I no longer get the short straw of writing the board meeting minutes. Shows me the topics that we've captured, with the headers that are suitable for creating those kind of chapter-based views. You can see the chapter-based tab, and also a list of actions, as we saw in the kind of in-meeting chat. If I click on the Copilot button, I get the Copilot pane that you've seen as previously, so it's brought through the stuff that happened in the meeting. So these are the conversations that I had with Copilot during the meeting that you saw in the first half of the video. And now I'm going to click on another one, showing the different perspectives by topic. So we had it thinks we had a disagreement about how to handle something. Actually, my view was that we didn't have a disagreement and we were broadly aligned. So again, just important to sense check the data that comes out from Copilot, and don't necessarily assume that because that's what it said on the tin. So excuse me, that's exactly what was intended. So I think it's pretty good at sentiment and intent. And then I thought I'd take my life in my hands and ask Copilot how it thought I could do better, which I wasn't sure was something I was entirely comfortable with, but I did it anyway. And I nearly censored all this as well, and thought I don't want my community of attendees showing having an AI tell me how I could have done a better job. I don't necessarily agree with all of what it suggested, because I think context is important, but actually the coaching and an external perspective aspect of it, and I know in PowerPoint, for example, it can coach you about how you deliver presentations. Those are really valuable things that you can get really good insight from. Finally, the transcript view, which you can see depending on your team's licensing. I've picked a particular area that it's highlighted for me, and you can click the sync to video button and it'll jump me straight to that part in the video. So it's really just about bringing, again, time to value. It's about, instead of hunting through where that stuff was and how to find that stuff, it's about making sure that I can access the stuff that I'm interested in a very speedy and very expedient fashion. So we've got a couple of questions I'm going to cover in the course of talking a little bit about data protection as well. So I only had this idea while Tita was talking, so forgive me if it's a bit spotty, but we had a question in there asking about the differences between Copilot and ChatGPT. So the short answer is they're the same but different. So the big difference with Microsoft Copilot 365 or Microsoft 365 Copilot is it's about the ecosystem in which the data lives. So large language models, be it Bard, be it ChatGPT, be it Copilot, they're all by and large doing the same thing. They've all got their quirks and their pros and their cons, and they're all kind of racing each other to get to the next, the next stage of that. I saw some stuff on LinkedIn recently, some research that had been done around comparing different large language models and how they handled things, and it essentially showed a scientific proof that reached the conclusion that said there's not a lot to choose between them, and actually the differentiating aspect is your data and the quality of your data. And if you feed the same data set into the different models, ultimately you converge at approximately the same point. So where Copilot is particularly strong is inside the Microsoft ecosystem, because it can talk about the data set it's been trained on, it can go and access the internet, so just like ChatGPT, but it can also see all of your work stuff. And that's the bit where it adds the value inside a Microsoft focused organization that you won't necessarily get inside a non-Microsoft focused organization. If you were a Google Workspace house and that was how you ran your business using Google and other SaaS tools and so on, personally, I think you'd be mad to go and pay for Copilot, because the value of it is inside the Microsoft ecosystem aspects of it. It's not inside the raw functionality, because the functionality you can get in other ways in other apps if you're not inside that Microsoft estate. I wanted to call out the work and web tabs at the top here on this Copilot. So work means I can see all of the context and I can see everything that's inside my organization. But most importantly, it has all of the data controls inside my organization. So if I'm using Purview or in old money Azure Information Protection to classify and tag data that's sensitive, Copilot will respect those tags, and I will only be able to see stuff that I'm able to see because of the way that the permissions are set up. If I click on the web tab here, you can see, because my organization is configured to use enterprise data protection controls in in Copilot, live demos in the admin center. It has a little banner, here we go, has a little banner on the bottom that says your personal and company data are protected. That's because I've configured our browsers and our environment to behave like that. But I wanted to call out one really specific thing that I haven't really seen anybody else talk about, apart from the bloke I nicked the idea off, which is buried away in the documentation in the commercial data protection section, is some stuff about how you can only enforce commercial data protection if you can control how DNS resolution happens. I appreciate we're kind of on the techie side of the fence here, but for those of you from a technical bent, if you can't control public DNS resolution, so if you've got people on let's say an Intune managed laptop just accessing raw internet, unless you're filtering them through some sort of cloud web-based gateway that you can rewrite HTTP headers, or you can see destination NAT translation down here. Unless you can control the way that the data flows, you can't be confident that you're enforcing the commercial data protection aspect. So that's a really important and not often enough discussed point, in my humble opinion. What I wanted to kind of show here was, the difference between the two. Michael asked specifically about voice prompting, so you can see there's the link for using a microphone in the web app. In a mobile app, you can use the voice to prompt it as well. But I asked a question about suggesting some books to help understand no and low code software architecture best practices. While it's thinking, I'll show you what ChatGPT said. So ChatGPT said, sure, here's a bunch of books. And I said, great, this is the one for me. This is going to neatly segue into the question about hallucinations, I'm hoping, if my internet behaves itself. Doesn't exist. So it's produced me a book that's fictional. So what I did when I first had that challenge, I'm just going to copy and paste something in the interest of speed, was I said, all right, I'm going to ask you to refine your search. And this time I want you to check that it's real on Amazon's website and validate that the ISBN code is real, because I don't want you hallucinating. And ChatGPT, because this is version 3, not version, sorry, 3.5, not version 4, because I'm too tight to pay for that, and Copilot, is saying I can't browse the internet, but I'm going to generate you some ISBN codes anyway. So these aren't real either, because we know the book doesn't exist. So therefore the ISBN code doesn't exist. If I Google the ISBN code, I don't think that's the book that we're after, right? Copilot is about to do the same thing. So it's going to provide me different answers. It's going to provide me different citations, different books. Some of them are real, some of them exist, and you can see it's beginning to cite some references down here. But it's also going to hallucinate, and it's going to provide me books that don't exist. And again, if we go through the cycle of putting the ISBN code in, it's going to do the same thing. So I had exactly the same experience in Copilot. So it's saying to me in this specific use case, fundamentally they're behaving and working in the same way. But what the Microsoft piece is able to do is provide context by adding in who you're working with, who you collaborate with, what documents you've got access to inside your organization. And actually, from my perspective, the value of the generative AI revolution is to be best found inside the ability to connect Copilot to your core business data. So inside your finance system, your ERP platform, your knowledge base for your IT support team, and be able to provide a ChatGPT-like front end to all of the data and processes that are buried away inside those systems. So instead of having to sit there and generate your management accounts as a finance person, being able to prompt a GPT front end and say, generate this month's management accounts and show me how they've changed compared to the previous month's management accounts, and it spit out that data for you. To me, that's where the opportunity lies around generative AI in its current guise in the workplace. I think Catherine, you had a question about hallucinations and how best to detect them. I think that's a really interesting question. I'm just hunting because I've got too many screens open for my stop sharing button. It's a really interesting question, Teacher. I don't know if you've got any thoughts. I think telltale signs that Copilot has gone down an unintended route is a nice way of phrasing the challenge that it presents. If you're looking at external data, I guess it'll be a while until the answer isn't just Google it and see what happens. So if you've got a suspicion that something might not be a bit like the book example I cited there, once you've been caught out a couple of times, I think it makes you quite cautious at first glance about the data that's being produced. I've had experiences of asking it to produce some PowerShell code for doing things, and it will invent PowerShell commands. It will often provide me really good stuff, but every so often it will provide me something that doesn't exist. And I, because I'm a masochist at heart, I quite enjoy having an argument with it about why it's wrong and why the information it's provided isn't correct, and getting Copilot to either agree or disagree with my stance that the information that's been provided isn't correct. I think it's an emerging skill is maybe the best way to answer that question.
I mean, the only thing I'd add to that as well is, from my experiences, I'm more confident with the response from Copilot if it gives me a reference of where it's got that info from. So that's one way to think of it. If it gives you a response without any references, but it makes sort of sense to you because obviously you're searching for something that you're knowledgeable about, then yeah, as Dave said, it's just about kind of revalidating it. But again, we're still in early days if you look at the big picture, and I guess these are the kind of teething or glitches that we will all be going through in some shape or form. But yeah, that's a good point.
Thank you, Tita. We're coming up to our hour. I think we've hopefully judged the time relatively well. I will ask if there's any other questions, if you can pop them in the chat now. We'll cover them in a moment. But just in terms of what's next, so we've already talked a little bit about data governance, the importance of knowing and understanding how your data is managed inside your organization before you embark on a Copilot or similar technology journey. We've got some services we can help you with around Copilot readiness and also data governance. We'd be more than happy to do so. We'd really appreciate your feedback from the sessions. We're trying some different stuff this year just to see what resonates with people. So we've done a couple of Copilot sessions already. Is this working for you? Are you getting value out of these kind of sessions? What would you like to see that you haven't seen? Anything like that would be incredibly helpful. And just a nod, I know Sarah, our marketing guru, is going to drop a link out to the attendees, but we've got the next in our series of Optimise IT panel discussions happening on the 21st of March at 11 a.m. There's the final one in the series, and then we're going to start a new series around business resilience later in the year, which we hope to see you at there. Just going to check for any questions. There's something. Oh, there's the link from Sarah. Richard, can Copilot create a presentation using existing template? Yeah, absolutely. Tita, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. It can do that. What you need to do, and I guess we can send, maybe I'll send you a link to the content, Dave. But if you have 3 slides and that have a title, a main body, and there's certain criteria that you have to set up on the slides, but you have 3 slides around your template that are in PowerPoint, then Copilot will be able to reference them and create more content. So the short answer is yes. I've tried it. Is it brilliant? It's a bit hit and miss, if I'm honest, but I think that's something that has to only get better, because that's the key thing when you're creating slides. You want your branding there and so on. You don't have to lift and shift everything across. So I'll send you the link to the guidelines on what to do to your slide deck to be able to use it with Copilot. It's a good question.
Another question from Ross: is Copilot available on Windows 10? Sort of is the best way to answer that question. So Microsoft's initial stance was no, we're going to make you all buy Windows 11 because that way you'll have to pay us some more money. They've softened a little bit, and there is a version of Copilot available, I think probably still in the insider or pre-release channels at this point, so not yet generally available. So you will be able to do that. It will probably find there are 1 or 2 limitations compared to the Windows 11 version, because that tends to be the cloud mechanism to encourage you to be on the latest and greatest versions to hobble some features. And also worth pointing out that we're heading towards the end of Windows 10's life cycle in the not too distant future. So if Copilot adoption is a big thing inside your organization, then that's something to factor in. Super stuff. Thank you ever so much, Tita, for your live demo skills. I thought you handled it manfully when on the odd occasion something took slightly longer than expected, which is always the joy of doing these things. Thank you, attendees, ever so much for sparing some time to come and listen to us talking today. Hopefully you found it useful. If you do have any follow-ups that you'd like to engage about, then please, if you've got an Esprit account manager, then please let them know, or our service delivery team. If not, if you just pop an email over to info@espria.com, we'd be delighted to help. And so as we come up almost perfectly on 11 o'clock, which I'm very smug about, I will wish you all a very enjoyable rest of your Tuesday, and thank you ever so much for attending.